Welcome. I'm so glad that you're here for this class on helping children to cope with divorce. So normally the first time that individuals attend this class, first we start off with a couple of vignettes just to get us in the mindset of what we're going to be talking about today. Then I introduce myself. Then we talk a little bit about the program and about what we're going to be covering, and then we dive into it and go ahead and cover what we need to cover. So why don't we go ahead and start off with the vignettes. Good evening. My name is John. Let me tell you about what I'm going through. My wife and I started going through a divorce a year ago. Since then, life has been a roller coaster. First, the kids are different. I'm not sure what's going on with them. They're grouchy, talk back all the time, and don't ever seem excited to come on their visit to see me. Visit? What am I, an old relative they're obligated to see? Anyway, then there's her, the other parent. Well, we can never seem to talk about anything now. It always ends up in a fight, or one of us just hangs up, and we don't talk again until the next time I get the kids. My job isn't great, and I've had to put in overtime just to make the child support payments and to get my own apartment. It's really hard not seeing the kids every day. They tell me stuff about their week, but it's just not the same as being there every night. I want to be there to feel their excitement about getting an A or making a shot in the game or whatever's going on. Anyway, I was told I have to go to a seminar for parents in my situation. Just what I need. Someone else to tell me I have no clue about how to be a parent. One more. Where do I start? Well, my name is Jane. I've been separated for about a year. In some ways, it's been so much better. No more dreading the evening fight and worrying about how much the kids were hearing. I've also gotten back into pottery, which I love, but I just wish I didn't feel so tired all the time. The kids were impossible today. They used to mind me so much better. Now all they do is talk back. It's such a battle to get them to help around the house. I usually just give up and do it myself. I'm also working full time now, which has been exhausting. The pay isn't great. I usually don't have a lot of money left over, but it's nice to have a break. At work, I can't worry about the house or the kids, and I'm even doing things to work toward a promotion. My biggest stress right now is dealing with him, the other parent. I just get so upset every time I hear his voice. We usually fight about what to do with the kids and end up not deciding anything. I'm supposed to go to a seminar that talks about kids and getting through the divorce. I have to take off work and pay $50. That's going to be hard this month. Although, if they give me ideas about handling my kids and getting through to my ex, it'll be worth the money. I could really use some help. So, what did you hear as we went through those seminars that the parents have in common with each other? What might they both be struggling with? You probably picked up that they are not getting along. They are fighting with each other. And neither one was like, yeah, neither one was really enjoying the conflict that was between them. It was causing distress for both of them that this was going on. They both expressed that they were having money or financial issues. They both talked about having to work more than they did before, and that has been a struggle in some ways. And then they both talked about concerns about the kids' behaviors. Both of them mentioned that the kids were acting out, and probably under the surface, there's worry. Knowing that the family is going through family changes with the divorce, the parents are probably concerned with how the children are doing in light of these changes. How did each parent feel about being told they must go to a parenting class? I've addressed this question to live classes, and usually the result is not too happy about it. And that is certainly understandable. Being a working parent myself, I understand, the many demands on time and how valuable your time is and what a sacrifice it is to take time away from your family and time away from other important things that you do in your life. So, as I've promised to the classes that I've taught in person, I here today make this promise to you today that I will do my very best to be fully engaged in this experience that we have going over this material with you today. Let me introduce myself to you. My name is Dr. Darlene Dempster. I am a licensed professional counselor and a licensed professional counselor supervisor, and I've been a counselor for 20 years at the time this video is being made. Most of my experience has been working with children, adolescents, and young emerging adults moving into adulthood, but not altogether there yet. I worked in my doctoral program. I was trained as a play therapist, and I did work with children and adolescents. And then upon finishing that program, I began working with college students. And the majority of my career was working with college students. And with every college student that came into the College Counseling Center where I worked, which was at the University of South Alabama, I we would ask them about their childhood and any meaningful experiences they might have had. And so I heard from hundreds of students about their childhood as they were, and many times the issues that they talked about might relate to parental divorce. So I try to incorporate what I learned over the years from the young people I worked with into this presentation. I also have two children myself who are both in elementary school. This program was not developed by me nor by Lifelines, but it is given across the country, and it recognizes that as parents we love our children and we're concerned about the impact of family changes on children. And the goal of the seminar is to try to see divorce from the eyes of the children. So, I'm presently teaching classes. I work for Southern New Hampshire University, um, and uh, and so I've taught classes over the years for several different universities. I'm teaching classes now, and the information that is covered in this seminar um, is aligns with information that's taught in university classes. Um, and you're going to hear some ideas about ways to help children to adjust to family change, such as divorce. You might hear some things that you've already been doing. Goodness knows that, I mean, we're not getting paychecks in the mail for being great parents. And there oftentimes we're not getting a whole lot of thanks, mom, or thanks, Dad. So there aren't a lot of pats on the back. A lot of the things that parents do don't get acknowledged, and they just do them and make sacrifices for their children. Goodness knows if you hear of something that you've already been doing that is a good thing for your kids, give yourself a pat on the back. If you need to gloat to somebody and say, I knew I was right, then go ahead and do it. Um, so we're all kind of stuck here anyway, and we need to get through this information. So I'm asking you to please give me a chance. And again, I do vow to give this my very best energy today. So typically, the whole program it's 4 hours worth of material. We're going to break this into two different presentations, and there will be a quiz following each section. If you do have a learning disability or difficulty with written tests, then there will be alternate ways that you can reach out to me or to Lifelines, and we will work with you to make sure that you are able to get credit for having participated with the course through alternate ways. And you could take a break whenever you'd like to in between the two classes, and you can pause the video whenever needed. And it is permissible if you'd like to work on the tests while you're going through the course material. That's perfectly fine also. Once you have completed the test and you send the information to me that you have completed the test, then I will let Lifelines know, and then the people at Lifelines will let the court know through your court number that you did attend the seminar. And then your certificates can be mailed to you. And this, since the court would already be notified from Lifelines that you attended, the certificates would just be for your records. So welcome to the group. Many different situations for those of you watching this video. Many different situations might have led to this point. You might be divorcing, you might be separating, changing the custody agreement. You might be concerned family or others. Um, Regardless, the information that we cover should be helpful to any one of those situations. But we're going to use the term divorce just for simplicity's sake. This seminar does have some limitations. So when you think about the immensity of divorce and the changes that can occur in a person's life as a result of divorce, it's really a great deal of information to cover in a pretty short time period. For example, I took a course in my master's program that was on grief. And we met for 3 hours a week for a whole semester. We wept through that semester. So to cover, an issue like divorce, such an immense issue in a person's life in 4 hours, is really quite a bit to cover. So, and we do have to cover information that is statistically possible with a number of the individuals who'll be taking this seminar. So we might cover information that has nothing to do with your personal situation. But I ask you to please each section goes relatively quickly. Just sit on your hands and we'll move through the material as quickly as possible. And since we're not meeting in person, but we're meeting online, you can just think about your personal situations as you're going through, because there's no risk of sharing anything with another group since you won't be interacting with the other group members. I am available if you have specific questions. You can ask questions on your test, and I can try to reach back out with you. Mostly my role in that situation would just be to point you to a resource that might be helpful for you to get more information or more individualized attention that you might be in need of outside of this class. You will be mailed your parent handbooks, and it will have information from the seminar as well as resources. I'd also like to apologize that the picture, the place where this video is kind of blocks some of the PowerPoint. I will be reading from the PowerPoint. I don't have control over where the picture of my audio is on the screen, so it will block on some of the slides, but I'll be reading the information and going over the information verbally for you. Sorry. So now I'm going to go over a non-fictional journal entry for a young person whose family is going through divorce. Can you imagine what it would feel like if your parents were playing tug of war and you were the rope? Well, I can. I felt as if I were being torn between my mom and dad. It all started when my parents got separated. I always stayed at home with my mom. This was mainly because if I asked to go stay at my dad's apartment, she would get angry with me and say, "You're just trying to kiss his butt." Another reason why she didn't want me to go was because of my dad's girlfriend. If I went to my dad's apartment, my mom would constantly call to see if she were over there. If I didn't go, I would get depressed because I really wanted to go. I always felt sorry for my dad because it was hard for him also. My mom doesn't have a job at the moment, so my dad pays all our bills and gives us weekly child support. It's hard, and I still don't know how he does it. I wish he knew how much I appreciate what lengths he goes to for us. I really do love my dad. Don't get me wrong. I love my mom too. I just wish she'd be more fair toward me when I want to go visit with my dad. I know that they're divorced from each other, but that doesn't mean he's divorced from me. Lately, my mom has chilled out a little bit and is okay with me visiting with my dad every other weekend. I understand now she was worried that I would begin to love my dad more than I loved her. I love them both the same, and that will never change. Through words of wisdom and the caring smiles of my friends, I've learned to cope with the heartbreak of a lifetime. I believe that everything will be better soon. I have plenty of great friends and a loving family. There lay the roots of my strength, the strength to get up and face the dawning of a brand new day, a day that's filled with hopes and goals yet to reach. So, as you heard from that little vignette I just read, the changes associated with divorce can dramatically impact children. That was a lot of words that didn't have to do with the latest song or what was happening this weekend or the big game or whatever. Um, so this seminar is going to teach how can we as parents manage our feelings and our reactions to the divorce experience in order to retain energy for parenting. Um, so how can we talk to children both about the divorce and also about, you know, their behavior? How can we respond to their behavior? And how can we know when they might need outside help or if we might need outside help? And where are some options? Where are some places where I could go to get some help if I need it or if my child needs it? So here's what we're going to be covering today. As you see in part one, we're going to be going over the divorce. So we'll talk about emotional reactions to the divorce, and that is a longer section because that is pretty universal. We all have emotions. Even if we are numb, they're still there underneath the surface. We're going to talk about involvement with the legal system, changes in the economic situation, a new relationship with family and friends, and how to deal with family and friends and their reactions to the divorce. And then also a period of adjustment, which we'll talk about dating, um, remarriage, and stepfamilies. And then we'll have a break. And the other part two will be covered in the second video. So, in order to be effective in responding to children's needs, we also have to acknowledge our own emotional reactions. Have any of you ever had a long day or have been frustrated with someone? And so you were doing something in your house, and this kind of mulling over whatever was in your mind. And then right then your children with their radar come right up to you and ask you maybe an annoying question, and then you kind of inadvertently just snap at your children. Um, you know, I ask that question, and most of the time, a lot of people kind of nod or raise their hand, and I too have to raise my hand because we're human beings. We're not perfect. When we get home, we kind of let our hair down. And sometimes people snap and are grouchy and aren't perfect. And we make mistakes in human relationships. Human beings make mistakes. So, but you can imagine during a long period of time, such as a divorce, when our energy levels, when a lot of new and different things are happening, we might be having financial stresses because of now having to pay more with bills and pay more for the mortgage and pay the court fees and the stress of ending a relationship and trying to start anew. That's a lot of stress at one time. And so that we are going through, but that our children are also going through. And they might need support from us during this time when we might have less energy, and might be more stretched thin because of the circumstances. So, in these circumstances, we need to understand, how are we going to respond to our children when they have these more higher needs from us, and how are we going to respond to family and friends and their reactions too, particularly when we ourselves are stretched thin. So, if any of you have been on a plane ride recently, you know how the flight attendant, right at the beginning of the ride, will often give the spiel about, if, God forbid, this plane goes nose down, and the oxygen drops, put the oxygen on yourself first before putting it on anybody else. Why do they say this? Because if you pass out, no one else on that plane is going to care like you do about your child, unless perhaps the other parent is on the plane. Nobody else will make it their sole mission that that child or children will get off that plane with you. You will be very aware of where your children are at every point that you're on the plane, once, when the oxygen masks drop. So our children need us desperately. It's a big, bad world out there, and our children need us to protect them, to teach them. And so we have to be well in order to be able to take care of our children. So, what does it take? What does it take during a time of stress and difficulty, um, to be able to take care of ourselves so that we can then take care of our children? Well, first we have to know, how do I feel right now? We have to be able to identify our feelings. We might need something different if we're angry as opposed to if we're sad. If we're angry, we might need to use up that extra energy, go for a walk, listen to some music in the car, either calming music or maybe kind of, you know, loud music to kind of get that energy out of us, right? So first we need to identify our feelings. Then we need to figure out, how are we going to manage our emotions? If I am, let's just say I'm sad. I had a really bad day. I saw something on social media with my former partner, and it just made me really sad to see that. Or something reminded me, I heard that song on the radio, our song, and it just made me sentimental and sad. So, how can I manage my emotions? Maybe take a nice warm bath, maybe call a parent, a loving parent, maybe go for a walk, maybe plan, go to an antique store. I don't know, but for it might be different for everybody. What might be helpful at that time. But first, identifying the feelings, then figure out, how am I going to manage my emotions in an appropriate way, and then getting support from other adults outside of the parent-child relationship who can help during this difficult time, who can provide support. If we do all of those things that we just discussed, then we are better able to listen and respond effectively to our children who also have needs. Think about the tomato plant. A tomato plant, as it's coming up, because tomatoes are heavy, just like our children at times can be heavy. It's not easy to be a parent, is it? So a tomato plant needs a stake. And when you tie up the tomato vine onto a stake that kind of steadies that vine, then it's able to support those heavy tomatoes as they come in, those heavy, delicious tomatoes as they come in. And in a similar way, we need support. Of course, we need support, especially when going through a very big family change like a divorce. So, in divorce and in life in general, There are things that we can control and things that we can't control. Isn't that true? Can we control the behavior of others? No. Can we control the thoughts of others? No. Now, we can tell other people what we think about things, and we can try to explain our perspective to other people, but we can't control what goes on in their head. That is outside of our realm of what we're able to control. We can control how we respond. Let's just say somebody is giving us a big mess, like of just irrational thoughts or dysfunction. They're just giving us a big mess of irrationality and dysfunction. And we might not be able to do anything to stop them from presenting us with this situation that is a muck with dysfunction. But any one of us could take a step back. If we were in a dysfunctional situation, any one of us could take a step back and say, okay, well, this is what you're giving me. What would any other reasonable person do in a situation like this? And we can take a step back and say, well, I could do this, I could do this, I could do this. And then we can choose which one of those is the best option given this circumstance. And we can choose that, the one that we feel like is the best option. And if we do that, if we take a step back, think about what our options are, choose the best option, and move on, we are not being passive. We're being cognitively engaged, and we're making the best decision that we reasonably can in the situation. Thus, we are impacting the process in a positive way, if that makes sense. So here are some things that we're going to be talking about. And I already went over these before. It's just, so why don't we, these are all areas of adjustment within the divorce. So perhaps some of you had a relationship in high school. Let's pretend you were in a relationship in high school and you weren't married at the time. In high school, before children, it was possible to say, you know what, this relationship is over and I never want to see you again. Even if you went to a really small school, um, you could have like averted your eyes and not looked at the person when you were passing by in the hallway, right? So it was possible before children to say it's over and I never want to see you again. But once you have children, in the majority of situations, it is pretty probable that you're going to have to see this other person again. Um, Therefore, it's helpful rather than to think of a divorce as the end of a relationship. It's helpful to think about a divorce as a time to redesign the relationship so that the very important remaining task of raising the children can be accomplished with a goal in mind of having a peaceful coexistence. Many people, as they go through the process um, of a divorce, and as they're considering a divorce, they think about pros and cons. Should I move forward with this divorce or should we stay together? Sometimes people, even as they move forward with the divorce, aren't sure if they're doing, they aren't positive about the divorce. And that is considered within the realm of normal for some people. If a person isn't sure about whether to move forward with the divorce or whether not to move forward with the divorce, it is possible to receive counseling called discernment counseling, which is to try to not solve problems. It's not the same thing as couples counseling where you're trying to solve problems in a relationship, but you're trying to determine, is it even possible to solve these problems, or is this relationship too broken to be fixed? So perhaps some of you listening to this might be all in different places. when it comes to the divorce. Some people are the top bullet point. I'm done with this intimate relationship. It's too late now, even if my partner were to make major changes. If even one of the partners in a relationship feels that way, then the relationship is over. Because it would take two people that were committed to the relationship for the relationship to work. I have mixed feelings about the divorce. Sometimes I think it's a good idea, and sometimes I'm not sure. Well, that is a painful place to be, isn't it? To not be sure about something, it's like going on a long trip with no GPS. When things aren't settled, it's an unsettling place to be. I would consider reconciling if my spouse got serious about making major changes. Well, that is a very passive place to be, right? Because there's nothing that we can do to make another person get serious about making major changes. So that is a painful place to be because you have no control over that. And then some people are at this place. I don't want this divorce, and I would work hard to get us back together. That's obviously a painful place, unless both partners are in that place, you know. But even then, it could be very painful. Like we both don't want the divorce, but we both don't know how to get along. So every one of these places, even the one at the very top, which sounds like that person made the decision, they are the one with control in the situation, that can be a very painful place to be too because of guilt. And because even if you fully decide that this is absolutely the right thing to do, walking away from something that you put a great deal of personal and emotional energy into is going to be a painful process for everyone. So, here are some rules of thumb about reconciliation. In cases of abuse, reconciliation isn't possible. No one should be abused in a relationship. And it's not healthy for children to witness abuse in relationships. So, reconciliation isn't possible in cases of abuse. Each partner decides independently. Even if one partner was, willing to work 200%, the relationship isn't going to work without full commitment of both partners. Outside parties should let the couple make this personal decision. If one partner already made up their mind that they're done with the relationship and the relationship is over, it would be kinder just to be really honest that the relationship is not going to work rather than kind of not, rather than saying, well, let's get in therapy to talk about it, because it that would make the other partner think that there was a chance that it could work. It would be kinder just to be honest and say, I hate to hurt you, but the relationship is over. If a couple did decide to reconcile, it would be important to let go of the past, and to work toward a new relationship. Now, I'm not naive. I've worked with couples with infidelity, for example, and it's a process. Getting past infidelity is a process, and it's not uncommon to have difficulty with trust following infidelity. That would need to be talked through. And so some things you can't just fast forward through. Some things would need to be talked through. Um, but if a person, if with patience on both sides, that would be, you know, I'm not wise enough to know every situation, but, it would take patience, it would take work. Eventually, a person would have to be willing to let go. After all the words had been said and everything's been talked through, it would have to stop coming up about every argument about things that had nothing to do with that, if that makes sense. Also, sometimes as a person goes through the divorce process and starts to feel the impacts of the divorce, see the impacts on children. Sometimes also in relationships, it's human nature that we take each other for granted in relationships. So sometimes after a person starts to realize the contributions of their former partner, sometimes people change their mind about the divorce, and that is within the realm of normal. So let's just say both partners went through this whole process of thinking through, am I doing the right thing? Am I not doing the right thing? And then they come to the decision, we are going to move forward with this divorce. Now what? What's the next step? The next step, unfortunately, is grieving. What do parents have to grieve? What do parents have to grieve? Loss of status and or identity. In our culture, more status is given to couples who are married. If you could see that very clearly during election season. If you look up at some of the billboards, everyone is going to say that the person is married. Um, and because more status is given, people make assumptions. If you're married, you're not out carousing around. Even if it's not true, people will still make that assumption. People get their identity from married from their relationship. Have you pulled up behind a car and you see the little stick figures of the parents and 3 kids and 2 dogs, the armadillo in the backyard? People get their identity from their relationships, and it's hard for that to change. Loss of a companion, coming home from work. Hey, I'm home. What's on TV? What are we going to have for dinner tonight? Sometimes it's a hard adjustment to not have kind of a built-in person. Um, Loss of a lifestyle. Many times over the course of a marriage, people get to know about the interests of their partner. They might get to know their partner's, their spouse's family, and those kinds of things can add to the pain of the divorce, to kind of walk away from from the family and from those kinds of activities that you used to do together. Loss of a sexual partner. Um, as partners get to know each other and feel safe with each other, um, it can be painful to walk away from someone that you've gotten comfortable with. Also, conversely, the thought of getting out there again after a divorce can be a really frightening thought for many individuals. And then loss of plans and dreams. When people are thinking about getting married, they think about so many things. We can take out this wall in the house and put some French doors there, or we can come up with a college fund for the kids, or one day I really want to and visit the Grand Canyon or something like that. So walking away from something that a couple has been building together can be really painful and really difficult, and it can add to the pain of divorce. What about for children? What are some things that they grieve? Loss of daily contact with a parent. So sometimes with children, um, maybe the parent who moves out of the house is the one that they just kind of had they could hang out together and it be quiet and it just be a peaceful vibe in between them or whatever. Or maybe they had a hobby in common that they both enjoyed, or maybe they both had this kind of banter between them that just kind of was enjoyable and fun. So maybe there was like a personality connection where they were just kind of two peas in a pod. Even if there wasn't some personality groove between parent and child, maybe that parent who moved out of the house was the one who had fixed that stupid DVD player. And now that they're not in the home, it remains broken for weeks. So again, We tend to take each other for granted, but when a person is not in the home, that presence is often missed. Loss of a family as they know it. Probably for most of you, as adults, you lived with your parents, with your family of origin when you were a child, and eventually moved out and moved into the world and got your own apartment and figured out how to do your laundry and how to cook your own food. So you went through the tunnel of family change already in your life and emerged out the other side and realized, it was hard adjusting. But eventually I was able to see that things were fine, moving out and being on my own. Our children have never had gone through big family change before. They have no way of knowing that this will ever get better. So they might need extra comforting during this time. Sometimes through age and through the experiences of life, we go through adversarial experiences, we have hardships, and we get over the hump of the hardship, we get over the hurdle, we get past difficulty, and we see, like, okay, things can really, really be bad for a while, but then eventually it will get better. If I just kind of hunker down and take it one day at a time, things do get better and you do get past difficulty. Our children might have no way of knowing that it will ever get better, and they might need extra comfort and support from us to see that, yes, indeed, it will get better. And they might need comfort from us. Loss of a lifestyle as they've known it. So again, children have no frame of reference for knowing about big lifestyle changes. While usually as you go into adulthood, you go through many changes over the course of time, and you can weather changes a little bit easier. Then sometimes for the family as a whole, there's a sense of loss, for maybe a member as they've known him or her. So sometimes losing the in-laws can add to the pain of divorce. If there won't be a relationship with them past this, it can be painful for that relationship to change or even end. And then sometimes, even if, let's just say, the marriage was unhealthy, and the divorce is the healthiest thing to do. Sometimes even if you're taking the trash out, sometimes a little bit of good might go out with the bad. So even if the marriage is completely unhealthy, maybe some good traditions or some good memories will kind of be sent out along with the bad, and that can be painful. Loss can cause difficult emotions, emotions that we're not so good at handling in our society, such as sadness and anger. Um, if you go into work and you're getting your coffee in the morning, and then other people come in, and they say, "How was your weekend?" And you're like, "Oh, I'm so angry," and you're punching they're gonna be like, "Oh, that's okay. I don't need any cream with my coffee," and slowly back out the door. Our society doesn't create a space for people to work through complex and difficult emotions oftentimes. Um, and so, um, and so it's difficult. These kinds of emotions are difficult to have. Also, sometimes it's difficulty to see past our own emotions to consider how might children be feeling. So let's take, for example, a parent who is on social media and they notice that their former spouse went on a date the night before, and they get very upset by that, and they're punching their pillow. They're very um, worried about that. That parent is probably so overcome with emotions, they can't see past their nose. They're punching their pillow, and overcome with emotions. They don't know if two doors down in their child's room, the child is also punching their pillow from something that happened that day. So that doesn't make us bad parents. Being overcome with with powerful emotions and not being able to think about how others might be feeling, that's a human trait. Um, but it is something to think about during an extended period of time, such as a divorce, when both parents and children might be experiencing powerful emotions. So let's look at loss. Let's look at grief and how grief can impact both parents and children. So there was a woman whose name was Dr. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, who worked with individuals as those individuals were dying. So as individuals were facing their own death, and also as the family members of those people were losing a loved one, she worked with them. And she noticed that there were stages of grief that both the individuals who were dying themselves and loved ones who were losing a loved one went through these stages of grief. And they have done research about the stages of grief and found that these are applicable also to divorce. So these are the stages of grief on the PowerPoint: denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. And we're going to talk about what do these look like when it comes to divorce for parents and for children. First, let's talk about some rules of thumb about the stages of grief. There's no set amount of time for each stage. One semester, when I was working as a college counselor, I had a young woman who was in a very difficult medical program on our campus, and she was doing her clinical rotations, and she also had two young children. And then that same semester, her mother died. Do you think that young woman had time during that semester when she was doing her clinical rotations to grieve the loss of her mother? No, she did not. She had to stuff it down and still go and take care of her patients and get through school and finish all her school activities, and also take care of her children when she got home. And so she stuffed it down until the breaks, and then she wept her way through the breaks. Um, that for that reason, that's why there's no set amount of time for each stage, because sometimes if a person isn't able to grieve right then, it doesn't go away. It's still there. It just kind of gets frozen for a little while until the person is able to look at that. It's also possible to go through a stage and then move forward or backward to a previous stage. Sometimes just depending on life circumstances. If you don't see your former spouse for a long period of time, you might start to do better. You might kind of get into a routine. And then if you see them somewhere, of course, that's probably going to bring up some feelings. So that's just an example. It's also possible to get stuck at a stage and need some assistance to get unstuck. So we're going to talk about that as we're going through the stages of grief. Regardless, it's important to find a healthy way to cope with whatever the stage of grief it is that you're going through. It's important that you find a way, how am I going to cope with these difficult feelings, and take it one step at a time, so that I could get through this difficult time, and get to a more calm and peaceful place around this divorce. And there's no one right way to grieve. There are many different kinds of individuals in this world. I've worked with college students, some of whom were like very physically active, and they would set new goals for themselves with working out, and with the way they ate. And so they would kind of set goals for themselves, and that's one way that they would structure things to get through a difficult time. I had other people who were very emotional and would connect with their friends and family, with others in their lives. Others who are very artistic and who would create expressive pieces of work that they were proud of and express their feelings through that. So there's no one right way. There are many different ways to grieve for yourself and for your children. And if you have more than one child, your two children might grieve in very different ways, and that is completely okay. Denial is one of the stages of grief. And in the stage of denial, there's a sense that if you notice, it's pretty similar for both parents and children. And it involves kind of like, this isn't happening. I don't see this. I don't even want to face it right now. Kind of like the college students would say when I was working with them, I just can't even with this right now. So it's kind of like, I just can't even. So I can't face this and this isn't really happening. Sometimes if you have children in the stage of imaginative play where they're playing with their toys and their toys are alive, they might have the two dolls and then they're making the dolls get married again. You might see them acting out the denial in their play. And it would be really important to not interrupt them if they were acting that out in their play, because that's the only place where they have control over the situation. Denial serves as a protection to defend ourselves against intolerable pain until it can be tolerable. And for children, it also provides a sense of control. So, it allows us to ease into something becoming reality to us. Anger is another one of the stages of grief. So what do parents have to be angry about? Perhaps broken promises. Let's just say there was an addiction problem in the relationship. You said that you were going to stop. You said that you were going to stop drinking or stop um, doing the drugs, but you never did stop. Or maybe infidelity. Even if there wasn't some egregious behavior of the other partner and both partners did their very best, but they just couldn't get along and they couldn't figure out how to make this thing work. Still, it's a difficult situation. It's a painful situation. Have you ever pulled up behind a car and the car was turning right and up onto a hill, and it was kind of a low riding car, so they were going real slow when they were turning, and you were like, move it, wanting to honk your horn, but you were like sat on your hands and tried to be patient and tried to be a good person, but it was really, really tough. We are not perfect. As human beings, we are not perfect. We can be impatient, and situations can really be frustrating. Um, and divorce, a lot of difficult changes in housing, having less money. None of these things is fun. Having to walk away from something that you built and then thinking about starting over and then noticing what the other person is doing and then the children are having difficulty too. All of these things at one time can be really tough. The difficulties that lie ahead, like, how are we going to resolve? Um, if there's less money, how are we going to resolve this issue? And maybe not having a clear answer in sight can also add to frustration and anger. What about children? Why might children be angry? Just like us, children don't like to experience pain. Parents with very young children know this very well. Your children, if your child kicks, you've got a very young child and they kick the blanket off themselves, but they don't really, like an infant doesn't know about pulling the blanket up over themselves again. And then they're going to scream until you go in there and pull that blanket up over them, right? So they don't like to experience pain. Children might perceive, be angry at their parents for what they perceive to be the failure of their parents to find another solution. Now, they might not know, nor should they know, everything that you might have tried to do to save this relationship. But it is extremely important that parents don't get into a defensive state where they're saying, well, you don't know about all the problems that happened in the relationship, and they did this, and they did this, and they did this, and therefore I had to divorce from them. Children don't need to hear about, conflictual relationships in intimate relationships between their parents. That is too much information, and it doesn't have anything to do with the children and their lives and their concerns. So it's really important that parents don't share too much information about the divorce with the children, because that's not healthy for the children to hear. The children don't need to be immersed in the conflict between the parents, because that's adult stuff. That's not kid stuff, and kids don't need to be exposed to that, and it's very unhealthy for them. Children might be upset about the changes that might occur in lifestyle, the financial situation. Let's just say because of having less income, the parents get rid of cable and instead are just doing Netflix and a streaming app for now. But then they lost one of their favorite shows. The child might be upset about that. Um, and, sometimes it just is what it is. They might be upset at themselves for thinking they have caused the divorce. Now, of course, anytime that, divorce is an adult decision, and if it ever appears that a child thinks that the divorce is their fault, we have to take that burden off of their shoulders and put it back on our adult shoulders who can handle that weight on our shoulders, because our children certainly cannot handle that weight. And that is, we'll talk later about messages to repeat to children throughout the divorce. And that is certainly one of them, that the divorce had nothing to do with the children. How do children express anger? They act out. They might fight with their siblings, with their friends. They might engage in self-destructive behavior, reject authority, break rules. Most of the time, it's going to be pretty unpleasant, because children express anger by acting out. So sometimes children will hear parents say, no, don't do that. But they don't understand what they can do to express their anger. So this is something that we're talking about when we say we need to find a way to manage our emotions and try to help facilitate for our children to manage their emotions. We're not saying the emotions themselves are bad. Anger is a normal human emotion, and it has a purpose. If it weren't for anger, a lot of people would be taken advantage of. So there's a place for anger, and anger is a legitimate emotion. So, for example, if I had a children when I was a play therapist that would come over and hit me in the play therapy room, I would say, no, I'm not for hitting, but you can hit that bop bag over there. Or if they were trying to stomp on the toys in the room, I'd say, well, the toys are not for stomping on, but you can stomp on this egg carton instead. So that's kind of what we're talking about here. The emotions are fine and understandable given the circumstances. How can we channel those emotions into a way, into an outlet that allows the emotions to be expressed and to go down in intensity over time? Older children might fear that expressing anger will damage the relationship with the parents living in the other home. So, for example, if you have a teenage boy and you're in the car and you say something, let's just say he's dating a girl, and you say something about his girlfriend, and you see that he didn't like what you said, but he doesn't say anything about it because he only has today and tomorrow with you, and that's it. Um, it would be important for the parent to say, hey, I noticed that looked like a cloud came over you just there. What did I say? Did I upset you what I said before? Because sometimes it's important to have conversations and even for little periods of conflict to happen, because otherwise things can build up and can cause distance in relationships between people. It's important for both parents and children to resolve feelings of anger and to work through the grief process, because it can be dangerous to be stuck in the anger phase. What are some safe ways to work through anger? There are some tips on page 17 of your parent handbook. If you have very young children, Oftentimes, play materials that can change over time, such as sand, water, paint, because emotions are complex. And children might not understand the complexity of emotions. Like, for example, bittersweet. A person can be sad and angry, or something like that. So, like, for example, if a child was playing in the sandbox, they could bury that dinosaur when they're mad at the dinosaur. The dinosaur was bad, so I'm going to bury the dinosaur. But then later they might, the dinosaur is fine and I love the dinosaur and he said he was sorry, so now he's over here with the other dinosaurs and they're all going to have a picnic or something. So allowing for materials that the child is in control over and that can change over time. A child can add new things to a painting or add new colors to a painting. A child can, put the little hippopotamus at the bottom of the bath, but then later on it can float by on top of the soap. So giving the materials that can change over time, and that they're in control over. Sometimes also competitive sports can be a helpful way to work through anger. Like, we're going to beat you. They're getting those feelings of anger and frustration out. Now, for children with social difficulties or something like that, even if they're not so good at working with part of the team, there's energy buildup with anger, and so riding a bike or swimming across a pool can let some of that energy be worked through and be expressed, which can help a person to feel more calm over time. There are more examples on page 17 of your parent handbook of ways to handle anger. And it's important also to find ways to handle anger for yourself. So maybe venting to a friend, maybe treating yourself to something special, maybe going for a walk to try and let go of some of the energy, maybe distracting yourself from the anger until you've had a chance to care a little bit less about it. Anything like that. Maybe talking to somebody who loves you and cares about you, just to get some understanding and affection from someone, or listening to some music, either calming music or maybe kind of aggressive music to get the frustration out. Bargaining is another one of the stages of grief. And you'll notice that it's pretty similar for parents and children. It's kind of like waving the red flag. I did not know this was going to be as difficult as it is. Can we just go back to how things were before? And then for children, you might see that they're changing their behavior, um, you know, very different from how they were before. Maybe keeping their room clean, doing their homework, taking a bath themselves without being told. They even rinsed. They don't have a weird spot of soap still in their hair. They rinsed it really good. These might be indications that if this is a dramatic difference from how they were before, this might be an indication that the child is taking responsibility for the divorce. And again, this is, we would want to always take that heavy burden off of their shoulders and put it back on our adult shoulders, because that is too much of a burden for a child to bear. Depression is another stage of grief. You might have heard depression talked about as a mental health diagnosis, and there is a mental health diagnosis, several relating to depression. But if a person came in that was grieving due to a divorce, in the majority of time, the person wouldn't be diagnosed then with depression. It would just be you're going through the grieving process, and this is completely normal given the circumstances. Now, if a person had pre-existing depression, then they could still be diagnosed with depression. Or if they're having extreme reactions to the divorce, such that they're not functional, they're having extreme problems with sleep or with appetite, then they could very well be diagnosed with depression on top of the normal grief. So what are some signs of depression? Withdrawal, not caring about things that used to be important, including hygiene. Sleeping problems, eating problems, and those can vary. Sometimes not eating or not sleeping. Sometimes it can be eating or sleeping too much, and sometimes it can fluctuate over time. Irritability is sometimes an issue. You'll notice that the issues that are talked about on this slide have to do, could have implications for school or work. So difficulty with focus, not able to, not having motivation or the drive to get work done. Sometimes you'll see in children a drop in grades or irritability or aggression. So oftentimes people might take a step back and say, let's say it's involving work. Maybe now isn't the time for me to take on an extra project at work. Maybe I'm not gonna offer to help the boss with that thing, or maybe I'm not gonna go from that promotion right now. And that would be a reasonable thing to do given the circumstances. Also, keep in mind that if a child is struggling with school, maybe now isn't the time for them to be grounded for a month for not doing well in their classes, because difficulty with focus is part of the grieving process. Maybe a way to address it, and again, these are your choices to make as a parent. Maybe a way to address it is to think about how can we try to help you with this difficulty that you're having with school. You're having a hard time with focusing on school. What can we do to help you so that you can, get back on track with how school is going? Why? Why? Why the struggle with school? Why the difficulty? Um, it's normal to grieve when a person is going through a divorce or when a person's parents are going through a divorce. For the parents and for the children, everything is different. You're looking forward to a future and you're not sure exactly what to expect. And that can be overwhelming to have so many changes happen. Even if a lot of the changes were very badly needed, and part of the divorce involved some excitement about changes and different and new possibilities, a lot of changes and new things at once can be overwhelming for everyone, and that can lead to depression. So it's normal to feel depressed about divorce. However, extended depression due to divorce would be a red flag to tune into. What are some ways to work through sadness? So, again, every individual is different and we all have different needs, and what might be helpful to one person might not be so helpful to another person. Some children and some adults might be in extra need of encouragement and emotional support at this time. Um, Other people might express themselves artistically. Other people might need to cognitively understand their emotions, and so they have like resources and books that have a cat that whose parents went through a divorce and he felt sad, and so then the cat you know connected with some of their friends, or maybe did a lot of drawing. So when a child can understand their emotions, sometimes it can help to normalize their emotions and help them to cope a little better with the difficulties of it. Some children might want just to go out in the backyard and play some basketball with you as a parent, or go for a ride in the car. So trying to yourself and your children, trying to find ways to first of all tune in. How am I feeling right now? How is my child feeling right now? And then in that moment, what would help me to work through the difficulty of these emotions that I'm having, and to get through perhaps a storm of emotions, and to get to until the feelings kind of stable out. Sometimes when I've talked to clients about this before, I talk about it like the tides. So the ocean can come in just like the waves of the ocean. Sometimes the waves of the ocean can wash over us and immerse us in powerful emotions. But what always happens eventually with waves? They will recede. So how can we get through the waves of the ocean without getting knocked over? I want to talk about suicide with you. And to do that, I first would like to show you a, um, a film. So give me just a second while I pull this up. So let me get back to the PowerPoint again. Um, so as you heard from that from that um, clip right there, suicide can be very painful for children. As a college counselor, some people tend to think that suicide is very rare, and that it does not often happen, and that if it does, then that person is surely hospitalized for a long period of time. But in fact, as when I was a college counselor, um, I would hear about suicide every single day from people that I was working with. Um, and oftentimes with college students, it would be, um, I'm sorry, I'm having some problems with this slide. I'm not sure if you are seeing it in the correct way. Um, so let me pause and fix this. I'm sorry about that. Um, so so perhaps so as a college counselor, sometimes I would hear from individuals who actually tried to attempt suicide when they were in high school, and of course I had many who were having suicidal thoughts while they were in college. As a matter of fact, the most recent statistics for college students show that 1 in 12 college students seriously considered suicide within the past year. And if you look at one of the statistics on this slide right here, 1 in 7 high school students have considered suicide within the past year. So it is not uncommon. 1 in 14 high school students have attempted suicide within the past school year. So what can parents do about that? First of all, asking. Asking is not going to put the idea in a student's head who wasn't thinking about it otherwise. Secondly, um, thinking about what are high risk situations. Does a student have a plan? Does a student have the means to follow through? With regard to the means, we have control over what is available in our homes. So making sure that any dangerous means, such as firearms or grandma's pain medicine, is not available to children. Also sharp instruments that they could cut themselves with or burn themselves with. Some children will engage in self-injury, and they learn about this from other kids, or from social media or the internet. Um, so not having things that children can injure themselves with. Alcohol and drugs would be other examples. Um, so even over-the-counter pain medication, or over-the-counter any kind of medication, children can overdose on those. I've had many examples of young people who did in high school maybe take a whole bottle of Tylenol or ibuprofen or drink a whole bottle of medicine, and then they just slept and threw up some blue stuff, and then nobody ever knew that they had done that. Um, so talking to kids about this and asking these questions. If it does turn out that your child says, yes, I am having those thoughts, and you determine that it's not safe for them right then, any hospital emergency room should be able to get a child to a hospital where they can be evaluated and treated for this. And if it's not an immediate emergency, outpatient counseling would certainly be warranted. So seeing a counselor um, could help the parent to navigate this difficult situation. Keep in mind that when children feel isolated and rejected by everyone, this is a high risk time. Um, so, for example, children who are LGBTQ are at higher risk of suicide than children who aren't. Children who have been maybe feel ostracized by everyone and disconnected with everybody for whatever reason might be at a high risk for suicide. Sudden loss is another risk factor for suicide. And sometimes for high school kids, for example, they would say, well, I'm not going to sit here and like, I'm not studying you two and what's going on with you. I'm going to spend time with my friends. But then if something happens with their friends, or something happens with their dating partner and they break up, then they will grieve the breakup or the difficulty that they're having with their friends and their parents' divorce on top of that. And there's all that at once. And then they can be overwhelmed with feelings then. So suicide is an important issue, and it's not an uncommon issue. So kind of having a plan in place for, God forbid, if that situation should arise. Okay, and acceptance is the last stage of grief. If you look at the slide, you'll notice that the young girl in this picture, it's still raining. It is not a beautiful day, but she's still getting out there. She has something to do that day. She's making herself more comfortable, and she's about to get out there and do whatever she has in mind. So she's thinking less about the past and less about the divorce. Think about it another way. Have you ever like cut your finger and then your finger was throbbing and you can't help when your finger's throbbing, like my finger, let's say it's your thumb, my thumb, my thumb, my thumb. Normally, when your body is all operational and no part of your body is hurt, you're not thinking about your thumb. It's just one part of your body. In a similar way, in a relationship, when a relationship is doing fine, kind of bebopping along, you're not sitting there thinking about your relationship in the middle of the day. Maybe if you're just feeling romantic, but other than that, you're not sitting there just thinking about it all the time. Um, so in over time, as you like, just like you would put ointment on your finger and heal it up and make sure it wasn't getting affected, and eventually your thumb will stop throbbing. Eventually, with time and with attention, and with taking good care of yourself, eventually you'll stop thinking about the divorce as much as you are now. You start to be focused on the present, on new interests, on other things you want to do in the future. And this is the same for adults and for children. Both parents and children will eventually get to acceptance, and it involves seeing problems for what they are and not linking everything back to the divorce. So let me read you a little vignette here. Dad is sitting on the couch staring at the TV with a blank, pained look on his face. Daughter comes in very upset and yells that she's home from school. Dad notices that she's home an hour early and asks for an explanation. Daughter starts to yell about how it wasn't her fault. The other kid started it. She thinks the principal's a jerk, etc. Dad slumps down in the chair, holding his head, and says he can't take it anymore. How is he supposed to do all this without anyone to help? He's a terrible parent. Daughter comments on dad sitting in front of the TV, not taking a shower, missing a job interview. What stage of grief is the dad in? So most classes, when I would say this, would say the dad is in the stage of depression. He missed the job interview. He is not engaging. He has low motivation. What stage of grief is the daughter in? She's in the anger phase. She got in trouble in school. She's acting out. She got in a fight, and it is no one's fault. It's sure not her fault. Um, so how could the dad handle this situation differently? What can the dad do? Take care of himself so that he'll have the energy to deal with his daughter's needs. Let's just say he had a terrible night. Let's just say he looked on social media and his former partner went on a date the former night, and he was up all night punching his pillow. And then he was late for work the next day and got written up. That is a bad day, isn't it? That is a bad, bad day. So what could he do? Hey, Joey, come on. Lunchtime. Bacon cheeseburger. I gotta have it today, man. Or maybe I put a picture of a guy with his dad. Maybe stop by and talk to your dad on the way home. Like you need somebody to tell you, I love you, son. You're doing the best you can. Just hang in there for the good fight, something. Um, Once he gets home, not one of us would want to get home and find out that our kid had gotten a fight in school, and might be suspended. Any one of us would be like, what? What am I supposed to do? I'm supposed to work tomorrow. But if that did happen, any one of us could, like, all right, you take off that uniform. Go in your room and take off that uniform, and I want you to clean your face, and then I want you to come right back in here and we're going to have a talk about what happened. That would give us just a few minutes to run, fix ourselves a glass of water, maybe step outside for just a minute, maybe call our dad. You wouldn't believe what happened now, and then maybe once the child comes back in the room dressed in their play clothes, like, what happened? What are we going to have to do to fix this situation? Do I have to go up to the school tomorrow? Do I have to apologize to some other kid's parent? Do I have to pay somebody's doctor bills? Like, tell me what's going on, so that we can figure out what we're going to do to get past this situation, right? Some experiences might trigger a return to a previous stage of grief. So let's just say you haven't seen your ex-spouse for a long time, and then all of a sudden you see him or her again. That would be a powerful trigger, and that would probably bring up some feelings inside of yourself, just like it would anyone. Or let's just say you are in a situation that reminds you of your marriage. Let's just say you go to a wedding and they play that song. Or somebody brings home a baby and it reminds you of when the baby was born or the babies were born. Or even getting in counseling. Now, I'm a strong believer in counseling, being a counselor myself. But being working through issues in therapy can be similar to cleaning out from under the bed. For a period of time, the room is going to be messier while you're getting all those dust bunnies under the bed. The room is going to be messier for a period of time until, while you are vacuuming all those things up. So there is a place where you just have to kind of have faith that eventually these difficult feelings will be worked through and will decrease in time. So we did it. We talked about the stages of grief. Let's talk about a few other things that are part of the divorce process. One is involvement with the legal system. Even the most uncomplicated divorce is going to involve some involvement with the legal system because marriage is a legal contract. This section is short to emphasize that involvement with the legal system should be minimal and involvement should be focused on what the legal system is reasonably able to do. So what are reasonable uses of the legal system? Division of property, parenting time agreement, and child support. Now, I'm not saying that the legal system is perfect. No man-made system is perfect, but those are uses of the legal system that it's set up for. The things on the other side of the PowerPoint here are things that the legal system is not set up for. punishing, getting even, proving who's right or wrong, proving who really loves the children, maintaining control, getting something that you didn't get in the marriage. The legal system doesn't have teams of psychologists on staff. So these aren't proper uses of the legal system, and with these as goals, um, would extend the time that a person is involved with the legal system. So it's not divorce in and of itself that harms children. I've had some young people who came home from the holiday in between semesters, um, who would say to me, I would say, "How was it going home?" "It was awful." "Why won't they get divorced? They fought the whole time. I had to hide in the room to get away from the arrows and the daggers that they were shooting at each other." So I've also had some young people whose parents got divorced, and they would tell me in the intake session, "Yes, my parents got divorced. I was able to see both of them following the divorce. That's not the reason why I'm here today." Great. Okay. So it's not the divorce in and of itself that harms children. There's a reason why divorce exists. So it's not the divorce in and of itself. It's conflict between the parents that harms children. When children are put in between conflict between parents, that's what harms the children. So here are some thoughts of children who are caught in conflict. And I'm not going to go through every single one of these. Let's just pick a few. I need to figure out who's right and pick a side. Why? Why should it matter to the child who's right in this situation? That's the adult's concern. That has nothing to do with parenting the children, and it doesn't have anything to do with what the children have to be worried about in their lives. So that's an adult concern, not a children's concern, and children shouldn't be burdened with hearing the two different sides in the conflict. I will make one parent angry or hurt if I love the other parent. Now that is a shame. Children should be able to, you know those movies where they have the people who are running across the field. It's like a wild field with flowers, and they're just running into each other's arms, and then they dive into each other's arms. Children should be able to run across that field into the arms of the parent with nothing stopping them, with wild abandon, diving into the arms of their parent, just full of love and sunshine and rainbows. Nothing should get in the way of a child being able to express full love for both parents. The scariest one on this list of thoughts of children caught in conflict are this one to me. I'd do anything to feel better or fit in. Aren't there plenty of influences out there that would tell our children that this particular thing could help them to feel better or fit in? Drugs and alcohol are obvious choices. And I hate to say this, but just like I always had someone on my caseload who had experienced suicide, I always had someone on my caseload that was molested as a child. There are people out there who would harm our children and take advantage of them when they are vulnerable. And so when our children, have any of you ever had a hard day at work and you thought to yourself, "I just want to go home and crawl into my cocoon and hide away from the world a little bit till I get my energy back. I just need to have a quiet night at home." Our children need that too. They need a place a little safe haven to renew their energy and to rebuild after dealing with a difficult world. But if they're coming home and it's a den of conflict between the parents, then children have no safe haven, no place that's safe for them, and then they will seek out that safety elsewhere. But we can't trust the world to take care of our children's vulnerabilities. So it's important for us to contain conflict and to not allow children to get caught in conflict between parents so that our children will have a safe haven with us, with their parents who care for them and will protect them. Why is that section in the middle of the legal section? Because the time of highest conflict between parents is often when they're going through the legal proceedings. So it's really important, even though it's the hardest time for the parents, it's really important for parents to try to be rational and think about this from the children's perspective. Despite the draw to use courts because of broken trust in the intimate relationship, it's important that parents retain the power to make parenting decisions. You ever seen that commercial of the dad that was sick, and he wasn't feeling well, but the toddler kid was still crying in the other room, and it says, "Dads don't take sick days." We don't have the luxury of falling apart. So when it comes to our children, even if we are so angry we never want to talk to this other person again, sometimes we still just have to kind of quote unquote suck it up and still be strong and still try to do the right thing for the good of our children. Of course, when we're dealing with the court and with lawyers and with others, our families matter more to us than to anyone else. And of course, we need to have our questions answered. This is our family. This is your family. And of course, you need to have your questions answered. We're going to talk about limiting the use of courts, the option of mediation for you, and also the option of seeking good legal counsel. So we'll go through each one of those in turn. Keep in mind, divorce is not a competition. No one is winning in divorce. No one is winning. It's just an unfortunate reality of what's happening right now, but nobody is winning. Divorce is a call for cooperation. One thing to keep in mind is limiting the use of courts. When people use the legal system inappropriately, it ends up being costly financially and emotionally. Um, Children are also most harmed when parents continually go to court. Remember that every time that you go to court, anxiety is going to spike up. You're steadily going to be paying money, even for parking. You're going to have to pay money. You're going to have to pay court costs. And it takes extra energy to go and deal with the difficult and sometimes unfamiliar situation in a courtroom. Um, Custody battles cause the most pain, particularly for children, when they literally feel pulled between the two parents. And it kind of reinforces that idea that somehow they're responsible for the divorce. And oftentimes, parents can end up more angry with each other after a custody battle, which doesn't bode well for raising the children after that is over. Mediation is an option that's available for parents. And this is a process in which both parents would go in with the mediator present, and each parent would say what they would like to see happen with any given situation that they're trying to resolve. What the mediator would do would be to try to work with the parents situation by situation to try to come to a compromise that works for the family. In this way, decisions about child rearing are made by the parents and not by a third party. And this can end up being less costly in the long run, can keep families out of lengthy court battles. If a person did decide to meet with a mediator, the mediator should have legal background and child and family development backgrounds. One positive thing about working with a mediator is then that the parents are making these decisions about the children, and they're moving forward because they compromised all in making the decisions about what to do about the children. Then they're moving forward into raising the children following the divorce on a more peaceful note, on a note of compromise. Seeking good legal counsel is another option that is available for families. And it's a good idea to seek a lawyer who has specialty in domestic or family law and who exhibits current knowledge of divorce laws. Oftentimes, if you're working with someone who has been working with cases and who's had a lot of different kinds of cases, then they would have seen cases that are similar to yours in some ways. And they could come up with creative ways to evaluate assets and take care of problems that might come up in your particular case. You want someone who quickly is able to work themselves out of a job. You also want someone who is able to, who's not fanning the flame of anger. Um, and who is able to help you to get to a cognitive place where you're solving problems and kind of moving forward with the divorce proceedings at a steady pace. If both parents have attorneys who collaborate with each other, sometimes you can resolve legal issues without going to court. But both parents would have to sign off on this agreement in order for that to work and to avoid going to court. Now let's talk about changes in the economic and living situation that sometimes occur. Let's just say there's a family of four, middle income family. Usually they would live in a house or in an apartment, and they would split the bills. There would be the income, maybe shared income from both parents who work, and then they would split the bills for the mortgage or the rent, and then, the electric bill and the other bills of the house. They usually would share a phone plan. Um, After the divorce and both have to move into two separate residences, the bills typically are going to go up, but yet the income is usually not going to increase after a divorce. Therefore, so when the bills go up, but the income remains the same, that means there's less money in the bank. There are also often court costs and other legal costs that need to be paid, perhaps beds for the kids in the house of the person who moved out. So there are new expenses. These changes could be temporary. Um, so for example, if one of the partners or both of the partners end up eventually remarrying, or if they move in with family, or if they go back to school and get another degree and then get a better job, then it's possible to get back to a better financial situation. But in the meantime, it's a simple math problem. Here was the income. Before, the income has remained the same, but now the bills have gone up. There's less money in the bank. The courts can't fix the situation of having less money um, because it's a simple math problem at that point in time. So keep in mind that the biggest adjustment when it comes to changes in the economic and living situation are faced by children. Children are the ones who are going from one home to another home. Oftentimes, the rules in both homes can be different, sometimes dramatically different. Sometimes also, when people have less income, what are they going to cut out? Extras. Cable TV, going out to eat, movies, entertainment. These things typically impact kids more. Unfortunately, we wish as adults we can enjoy ourselves as much as kids can sometimes, right? As much as possible, it's important that we try to minimize the child's stress. I'm not saying keep cable or go out to the expensive concert if you can't afford to do so. I mean, at the end of the day, parents need to make the budget balance and not go into debt. What I am saying is, how can you know, okay, we can't go out to the concert, but guess what? We can go, we're going to put the tent up in the backyard and we can camp out there tonight. Or, hey, guess what? We're going to go and feed the turtles tomorrow at that park that has the turtles. Or, guess what? We're going to go to the library and we're going to rent one of those movies they have there so that we can, or we'll get some books at the library that we can read together. Or we're going to make some brownies, something. Or, hey, you're going to your other parent's house. I'm going to help you pack up all your stuff. And look, you can bring this with you. I know you love it, and that way you'll have it with you there. Does that make sense? So trying to minimize their stress as much as possible and making sure that they have things to look forward to. So what are some ways to handle the economic stress during these difficult financial times? Of course, it comes down to parents to avoid going into debt. So other people live within the means that you have now. How do they do it? And any one of us, if we had to, could pull out, could write down on a piece of paper, here's the income that I have available. Here are all the bills that I presently have. What do I need to do so that the numbers are lining up? Do I need to change my insurance company? Do I need to get rid of this cell phone company that I'm working with? Or maybe, um, you know, get a different kind of cell phone? What do I need to pay off this debt? How can I do that? Um, so trying to find a way to live within the new means. Of course, we all want our children to have nice things, but it's smart to avoid buying things for children to make up for other losses. Because what our children need most of all is our love and our time and our attention. And they do need for the family to be financially stable. So try to use this situation as an opportunity to learn about budgeting skills or sharpen budgeting skills. Any one of us, if we needed to, could pull out a calculator. Here's how much income I have, and let me subtract each one of the bills and try to manage this month. How much do I have to spend at the grocery store? What do I need to do to get through this month in a way that we can manage? Um, if you need to, where can I get some extra support? Can I trade? Can I carpool with somebody to work? Can I maybe have a potluck and share meals with others? Um, it a trade-off on babysitting. Now, I told you earlier that I always had someone on my caseload that was molested. I am very cautious about who I allow to have time with my children. If anyone wants to spend time with my children, I'm usually a little apprehensive about that. Like, why do you want to spend time with my children? But for people that I deeply trust, and I would encourage you to do the same, if you deeply trust someone, you, person that I deeply trust, I will watch your children on this Friday night, and then maybe next Friday night you can watch my children and we won't have to pay for a babysitter. That's the idea there. Sometimes people use this time of family change to get back in school, or to take on a little part-time side gig to make a little extra money. Some or maybe work toward a promotion at work. Um, One option that's available for you, again, I do not work for Lifelines. I just teach this class on the side, but they do receive money from United Way, which is a charity, and they have consumer credit counseling services, which is available, which is they offer financial counseling for individuals who are struggling financially. and maybe can do budget counseling with you or talk about other options to try to figure out how to live within the new means. There are also other charities available. So if your family, the key needs of your family aren't being met, you can call United Way. The number is 211, and they can give you information about what local charities could help to meet your family's needs. Child support can be of some financial help, but it typically doesn't return to the pre-divorce financial situation. What is child support? It is as much as possible to maintain children's previous standard of living and to minimize children's social and emotional adjustments. Child support is not payment for visitation rights. It is illegal and extremely damaging to children to withhold visitation because of unpaid child support. Child support can be used for establishing living conditions that were similar to before the divorce and or to help set up a second household, such as reliable transportation or even clothes for a job interview. So there's more information on page 30 about talking to older children. So if you have older children, this is a chance to talk to them when you are having financial struggles about how to sacrifice and how to make do when you are going through leaner times. I'm sure some of you might remember times when things were tough when you were a kid and how your parents got through difficult times. And those can be important lessons that your children can use. You might have used some of their tips um, at various times in your life when things were tight, like, okay, we can't go out to eat, but I put this chicken in the crock pot, and so we're going to have this for dinner tonight. So just kind of thinking about things like that. How do you survive even when times are tough? So now I'm going to read some scenarios having to do with economic changes and talk through these situations. Okay, I'm a 9-year-old girl and I just got back from visiting my dad for the first time in weeks. He was so excited to show me his new place. But when I walked in, I couldn't think of anything to say. He has this little efficiency apartment with a roll-out bed. He laughed and said he's saving up for a TV. He apologized for not seeing me sooner, but said since he started his second job, he has to work a lot of nights and weekends. I know the second job has something to do with child support, but I guess it also has something to do with me not getting to see my dad. So, how would that little girl feel? So it's child support, and she knows that she's the child, so she could feel guilty, couldn't she? She might be confused and think, well, gosh, Dad, I'm so sorry that you're having to live here in this terrible place with no TV. I'm sorry for even existing. So sometimes kids can get really confused, and we want to make sure that that we're not saying things to them about how expensive child support is, because that can be really confusing for children and make them feel bad about being a child and about the child support over something that they have no control over. I'm a 6-year-old boy. I was getting all my stuff packed to go see Mom for the weekend. I was really excited about showing her the Power Ranger pictures I've been drawing all week. Dad just came in and said I wasn't going, something about a child support check not coming. So, a child doesn't know anything about a check. Have you ever been at the store and you were like, no, we're not going to buy that right now. That's kind of expensive. And the child says, we'll just use the credit card. Just write a check. Children have no conception over, no, this is really money that I have to work for, and this is a lot of money, and I don't think you understand how expensive that is. So, as we said earlier, it's illegal to withhold visitation because of unpaid child support, and the child would be very disappointed if he was looking forward to seeing a parent and then he can't see the parent because of something about a check, that would be very confusing and frustrating for a child, and a child wouldn't really even understand what that even meant. Now we'll talk about new relationships with family and friends following the divorce. So oftentimes when a parent brings a new child into the world or adopts a child, often they excitedly talk about it. This is the best thing that ever happened to us. We're so excited about this. But oftentimes during a divorce, the language changes. And sometimes people start to think in terms of my child. And that is really unfortunate because it's raising a child as a single parent is a lot of pressure. There are some situations in which a person would in which a person would want another person who loves that child as much as you do to be there to help to figure out what are we going to do in this situation. For example, I've had several young people who had a sibling who got into some heavy drugs. Um, so I had a situation in which I worked with a young person whose sibling already went through rehab. I had several in this situation. The sibling already went through rehab, and then they were struggling with using again after that. As a parent, what would you do if a child was living with you that had already been through rehab and then they were using again? Rehab is very, very expensive. If you couldn't afford it, what would you do? Would you kick them out of the house? Back into the heroin den? Would you allow them to still live in the house and then things were coming up missing and then scary people were starting to come around? That is a very, very difficult situation. And you would want somebody else who loved that child like you love that child to kind of figure it out. So these kinds of situations do happen, really difficult situations. Also, young people want to love and be supported by both parents. Young people deserve to be loved and supported by both parents. So, in what ways can family and friends become more important because of the divorce? And in what ways may family and friends contribute to the pain of the divorce? Family and friends can become more important because of the divorce by perhaps offering extra support, emotional support, financial support. They can even be there for our children. Let's just say it's the example like we talked about earlier, where we're in our room punching our pillow, overcome with feelings, not able to see past our nose. If Aunt Sue picked up the kids from school that day, and one of the kids looks like they're upset, she could say, "Well, how was your day, sweetheart? What's going on with you? Oh, what happened with your best friend? You guys got in a fight?" And then your child would have somebody to talk to, and they could help with being there for the kids. Maybe also family and friends could be someone for you to talk to that's an adult. Adults can handle the complexity of adult emotions. And you could share details about the divorce with a friend or with a loved one, an adult, and they could help. You could vent, you could get your frustrations out, maybe problem solve how you're going to handle situations, and they could be there for you. And sometimes children can develop stronger relationships with their family following a divorce. In what ways can family and friends contribute to the pain of the divorce? Maybe taking sides, trying to manipulate the situation, trying to make decisions for a parent, or talking bad about the other parent in front of the children. What are some ways to offset the negative responses from family and friends? What if they are doing some of those negative things? talk to the family members is one possible way of handling it. Set some boundaries. What is and what is not okay to talk about regarding the divorce in front of the kids. Maybe some of the family members are just upset and worried they're not going to see the kids. So, for example, reviewing holiday schedules. Of course, you're going to see the kids during the holidays. Or, hey, we're splitting up. I'll have Thanksgiving, you'll have Christmas, or whatever holidays you celebrate. Kind of talking it over and being clear about what's happening. And sometimes just knowing what's happening can help to lower anxiety and stress. If there are family and friends who bring up anger towards your ex-spouse, who are fanning the flames of anger, maybe maintaining distance from them. It wouldn't necessarily have to be, um, you know, forever. Maybe it's just a temporary thing that you would need um, to have some time. The primary people who are struggling following a divorce are the two divorcing parents and their immediate children. So if others are making things more difficult for you, then it's reasonable to say, like, you're not really helping me right now, and therefore I need some space from you because I'm really having a hard enough time right now, and I really can't handle what you're bringing to the table. Also, if people are trying to pressure you to do things or they have suggestions for you, keep in mind that these are your decisions to make, and you don't have to explain your decisions to anyone because these are for you to make and not anyone else. It is important to keep in mind that children do need relationships with extended family. Um, there's a lot you can learn from your extended family. You learn about your culture, your family strengths, values, things like that. Um, Relationships usually do change as a result of a divorce, and sometimes some relationships will dissolve. If it is true that you end up losing some relationships that were a part of your life because of some of the difficulties of the divorce, it'd be important to try to get new relationships into your life in order to help to meet your needs. Some of you might have heard the expression, don't air out your dirty laundry. Some families really take that saying very seriously. And when they're not feeling well and they're going through a difficult time because of the divorce, they isolate themselves and try to hide away from other people so that other people won't see them when they're in a vulnerable state. And that can create what's called a closed family system. In a closed family system, it's hard for new people to come in and offer support to the family. Often in these closed family systems, the children become the primary emotional supports for adults. This is very unhealthy for children. We're going to talk about this in just a minute. In an open family system, the family gets out into society and meets new people that can help to meet the family's needs. So, a parent should never put the child in the role of being a confidant or a supportive person um, for the parent to get their emotional needs met. That's called parentification. Let me give you an example. As part of my doctoral program, I had to do a dissertation. So I gave close to 500 assessments to students at my university where I was. And one of the questions on one of the assessments that I gave asked, did you have to take care of your parents when you were growing up, or your major caregivers growing up? Did you have to take care of them? That's called parentification. That can often happen if you have a parent with a substance abuse problem, if you had a parent with a disability or a mental health condition. or if your parent would lean on you to take care of them emotionally or treat you like a friend and tell you their problems and ask for support from you. So that's called parentification. I also gave another assessment to the students, and I had males and female students that I gave these assessments to. And the other assessment asked about unwanted sexual experiences. Now, keep in mind, these were college students, so these kinds of experiences might have been more common among them. And among of those unwanted sexual experiences, some of them could have been serious situations like rape, but then some of them could have been, well, I didn't want to, but I kind of they wanted me to, so I did it. So, it could have been any number of unwanted sexual experiences, really serious ones, but then some of them could have been like I just felt some pressure to do it. And so I did engage in that activity. Um, so, and we found that those students who had been parentified were more likely to have to have experienced unwanted sexual experiences. Why is that? Because if someone grew up in a home in which they put their own needs on the back burner to try to take care of somebody else that was really beyond their developmental ability, they grew up in a home taking care of others and putting others' needs before their own needs. Then by the time they get into adulthood, they continue to do that. They put other people's needs ahead of their own needs. And of course, engaging in unwanted sexual experiences is risky behavior. There's risk of STDs, risks of unwanted pregnancy. It's unhealthy to not set appropriate boundaries and to do things that you don't want to do. It's unhealthy in a lot of different ways. So, um, one way to maintain an open family system where the family is receiving support from other people in society is to get out in society and to build social and community supports. So where can a person in society receive support? Um, so think about what kinds of things did you used to do before you were married? Do you have special interests? um, Go and do some of those. Like some people like to listen to music, or some people really enjoy, going out to restaurants, or really enjoy cooking, or so maybe, or photography, taking a photography class, going bike riding, going and listening to music. What kinds of things did you do before? What about getting together with some friends that you had before your marriage? Maybe reigniting some of your friendships or going deeper with some of your friendships. Finding comfort in the company of those in similar situations. I have had parents before talk about, well, when I drop off the kids at preschool, I would ask some of the other parents who maybe toilet, working on toilet training with the kids, or if at the park talking to other parents, or if your kids are on the soccer team talking to the other parents at practice, stuff like that. There are also groups, classes, faith communities, the gym, places out in society. If you keep going to the same water aerobics class, you're going to get to know the people in your class, because people are creatures of habit, and you'll get to know people who go to the same thing. There are churches, faith communities, other places to receive support in society, joining organizations, joining groups. Also, trying to figure out, how am I going to get my needs met, and how am I going to get the family's needs met? So think about, were there things that my former partner used to do? How can I get those needs met with those things that they used to do? Um, such as some of the ones that are on the PowerPoint. Who's going to take care of the children if I'm unable to do it? Who will where can I get the car serviced? What if your former partner was the one who would cook? How am I going to have nice meals? If I'm financially short, where can I get some financial assistance? Are there, and that this could be services, some of these services you might pay for. Some of these services could be charity services, and I already told you about United Way. And then some of these might be, where can I go to receive healing, such as therapy? Um, so we're going to talk a little bit later about when to know when counseling might be needed, and I'll talk to you in the second part about where some places locally where you could get some to get counseling. So now we're going to talk about dating, remarriage, and step families, and then we will take a break. Ideally, if we're entering into a new relationship, we would want to date if we were confident and secure in ourselves. Um, However, some people, after going through the stages of grief and going through the divorce, it is not really a stable time, and people might feel like there's a hole in their chest. And some people dive into another relationship because of feelings of anxiety and vulnerability as they're grieving. Rule of thumb, it's ideal to take at least a year to rediscover yourself after a relationship ends. Um, so, so that's just a rule of thumb. What's the danger of entering into a new relationship too soon? One danger is bringing unresolved issues and baggage into the next relationship. And another danger is the risk of exposing children to a new parent-child relationship before the child has had the chance to adjust to the parental separation. So there are new family structures that we're talking about. We're talking about dating, remarriage, and step families. So let's talk about that for just a few minutes. Dating. If you are the non-custodial parent, it's really important that you separate time from dating and meeting adult needs from the time for meeting the children's needs. If your children are staying with you, it should not be a time for casual dating relationships. Um, let's just say a relationship becomes more than casual and it becomes a serious dating relationship. At this point in time, it's up to you. It's a parental decision. Am I ready for my children to meet my serious dating partner? If you do decide, yes, I'm ready for my children to meet this serious dating partner that I have, it's important to keep this initial meeting relaxed and friendly. The children shouldn't be pressured to just love this other person or to have an awesome time with this other person. Just come away just loving this other person. Remarriage. A large percentage of parents will remarry. However, 60% of remarriages eventually end in divorce. Usually, if I'm teaching the class in person, there's a loud, audible groan. Why are you telling us this? It's so depressing. Um, Keep in mind, though, that when divorce occurs in a second marriage, it's typically within the first few years of chaotic adjustment. Also, keep in mind that a lot of these divorces in second marriages happen when people rush into a new relationship. So one way to one way to avoid a second divorce might be by slowing things down. So why does divorce sometimes happen? Because baggage from the first marriage is bought into the second marriage. Let me give you an example. Oftentimes, difficulty with trust is pretty common to happen after infidelity. Um, And I've done couples counseling before when I was working with college students. I've done couples counseling, and not all. Sometimes they were non-traditionally aged college students, and difficulty with trust is pretty universal. Even if a person gets into a new relationship after having been cheated on, they might have difficulty trusting this new person. This new person might be true blue, would never cheat, but a person still might have baggage from the first relationship, and difficulty trusting this new person, this new true blue person. Um, so that is bought into the second relationship. So a person would need to work through the issues from that first experience of having been cheated on, so that they don't bring that distrust into the new relationship. Also, combining of families is difficult. The Brady Bunch made it look so easy, didn't it? But just think about how complicated that situation must have been. Also, think to yourself. Remember your first holiday with your in-laws and how awkward it was sitting there and seeing how weirdly they did things. We have rules from our families of origin that we picked up from them growing up, and our spouses often have different rules from their family of origin. And then you probably developed rules in your marriage, in with your former partner, and sometimes those rules will be carried over into new relationships, and our new partner might have completely different rules. It's a difficult adjustment, particularly when there are step parents and stepchildren. So here are some questions to consider before entering second marriages. Am I simply filling a void left by my previous marriage? Have I worked through the stages of grief? Have I worked through issues from my previous marriage? So thinking about all those things. Here's some rules of thumb for step families. The biological parent should stay in charge of discipline while demonstrating respect for the feelings and needs of the step parent. Think about it this way. For the child, they had to hear that the divorce was happening. What? Seriously? Then the parent moved out of the house. Then they found out that you might have been dating again. What? Then you got serious and they had to meet this new person. Okay. Then then they found out that you were getting married again. What? All right. Then the person moved into the house. Okay. And now they're going to get disciplined by this person? Can you kind of see how the indignation just builds and builds and builds? You can just sidestep this issue altogether, um, by just letting the biological parent discipline the children. Loyalty conflicts might prevent older children from forming quick attachments. So for an older child, they might feel that even showing that they like a step parent would be like stabbing their biological parent in the back, in a sense, or betraying their biological parent. So allowing children to get close with the step parent at their own pace, being a little distant, and just kind of ease into the relationship would be more appropriate. A step parent can be an additional role model, supporter, and adult friend. I've had some college students who their step parent was the first loving parent, first loving, non abusive, available parent that they ever had in their life. Unfortunately, their biological parents were neglectful, abusive, and the step parent was the first loving parent they ever had. Um, Even in those cases where the step parent, was the first loving parent, the child oftentimes would still long for a more healthy relationship with their biological parent. So step parents should not seek to replace biological parents because that's not even possible. So there are in your parent handbook there are is reading on the subject of combining families. And because it is a complicated issue that does require special consideration, I would encourage you to look over the reading and website. Take advantage of the information age and take advantage of all the resources that are available out there to maximize your chances for success. So we covered all of these issues about divorce. Divorce does have many challenges and changes, and all of the things that we talked about are all part of the normal experience. So we talked about all these things, trying to figure out how to cope in a healthy way, trying to have a healthy support system for yourself, limiting the use of the court, trying to have a realistic household budget, slowly going into new relationships after having had time to heal, and asking for help when needed. So now we're going to take a little bit of a break, and there will be a separate video for the second part of the course.